Welcome to the Real Life Groups Leadership Podcast, a conversation about creating small groups where people grow in spiritual maturity in relationship. We're focused on you, the small group leader, giving tips and tools to help you lead effectively. Well, I want to welcome you to the Real Life Groups Leadership Podcast. My name is Chris Short. I'm your host, and today we are starting something new. We're going to be doing a bonus episode to Season 2 as we kind of debrief our annual groups leadership training. Now, that's a big sentence we just had recently, but this has been a really neat experience training our leaders across campuses. And so I wanted to invite in two of the speakers who kicked off our training, Christian Putman with our Coeur d'Alene campus, who is the adult Discipleship Ministry and group leader, etc.
All the things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Welcome. Good to have you. And Jenna Fore, women's ministry leader at our Hayden campus.
Yeah.
And you guys started this conversation that really was kind of a theme for the overall day, this training that we had, which was intentional leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And so looking forward to unpacking that a little bit, get kind of practical on things that people were asking questions about and going, okay, what do we do next with this? But one of the things that you guys talked a lot about throughout the day, and I was just sitting in there as a participant, as a group leader, and was really inspired. One of the things you guys kicked off with was this idea that there are roadblocks and challenges, detours that groups go through. So I just wanted to start with that. Is that something we really have to deal with and talk about when it comes to groups? And I mean, groups, do they have problems?
We have a few, yes. There's a few problems.
There are people involved.
There are humans, and so maybe give us a little bit of an overview of some of the things you guys talked about related to roadblocks. Like, what are some of those? Explain that.
Yeah, one of the ones, I think I got to do youth ministry for so long and then switching to adults ministry, I always make the joke that at that time when I started a new group, that God seemed to give me a group that had a lot of roadblocks, and so that I can kind of process through those. And I know for all of our leaders out there, we all have different things we navigate. One of them was one day I was super excited. We were doing a sermon, and one of the stories in the sermon was the woman who poured out the year's wages on Jesus's feet.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is the best story ever. She was totally transformed by the gospel. So good. And then one of the group people had shared, man, it's a good thing that the Bible is just kind of an interpretation, and
oh wow,
that if I was the Pharisee, I would have thought that Jesus was kind of a mean person, and I would have never followed him. And I was like, oh no, I never heard that the story go that direction. And so I said, hey guys, I know we have our group guidelines. Can we pause for a minute? This is actually a verse about who God is, and Jesus is God. And then we went into it. We kind of talked about it, asked some questions, and then we said, hey, let's jump back in. And I kind of had to navigate that on the fly. As sometimes people with where they're at and what they know, that's some of it, and fixing and some of the things. I know that you shared some stuff too, Jenna, on some struggles and things that you've seen.
Yeah, what else? What are some other things?
So I'm speaking from like a women's breakout perspective. And one night, early on in our marriage and in our leadership, my husband likes to wear Crocs, those shoes with the holes in them, right? And gosh, I used to give him a hard time about wearing Crocs. And so we're in a women's breakout, and I don't know, I started talking about Crocs and how my husband wears Crocs and kind of teasing him. Well, it led to some other women jumping on board. And by the time I realized what had happened, they were saying things, oh, I hate it when my husband does this. I hate it when my husband does this. And I thought, we've gone way the wrong way. This went way off track. And so I like to say no crock talk.
Okay, so cross talk.
Cross talk and no crock talk. And so really, I want to hang out with people who build up their husbands and who are respectful. And I wasn't being that at that moment, and so I didn't quite realize it. But I learned that one the hard way, and so I had to kind of guide it back and say, "Hey guys, I realize I started this, and I'm going to redirect us because I love my husband and his Crocs, and now I wear them." So,
man, I love both you guys just sharing those stories right off the bat, because it just reminds, I think, all of our leaders that there are real challenges that we're going to face in a group. And, a lot of times that stuff that we kick off and maybe we didn't plan for and lead, and we can't be prepared for every situation that comes our way. Like, there's just no way around it. But the theme I heard through kind of these, you guys shared a lot of great stories, was we're trying to get people back to intentionally lead like Jesus did. which involved, very complicated situations. I'm sure, Jesus being the Son of God, he had that foresight to be able to see them. At the same time, he navigated them and he geniusly kind of helped them take the right steps. So maybe let's shift gears from, okay, we have this problem of a group that, we want to be intentional disciple makers where we help people grow in spiritual maturity. What would be some of the practical things that you guys have learned and seen, maybe some things you touched on, maybe some you didn't, that we would encourage a group leader to lead out of those things? What do we do with that?
Yeah,
maybe Jenna, what do you think first?
Sure. So we talked about intentionality, and Jesus was obviously very intentional. And like you said, we want to be leaders that are as much like Jesus as possible. And what I see a lot in Jesus's ministry is he asks a lot of questions.
Yeah.
He's curious. He's asking, what did you mean by that? Or how did that affect your marriage, or whatever that may be? And so we see Jesus asking a lot of questions, and I think questions are important. They show that you're interested in their answer. It shows that you're investing in them. It's a way to build relationship, which we here at Real Life we're keen on building relationships and discipling in that way. And so asking questions is a very good way to be intentional and to get more from someone and to show your interest in them. So
you're kind of putting something out there just a little bit beyond, trying to lead towards something. And you may even have some of the answer that you're hoping for, but you're going self-discovery. Like you actually have to process this out loud to get to that destination. That's a huge one.
It's a huge one. So that's one of my favorites.
Yep.
What about you, Christian?
Yeah, I love this conversation. Just as Jenna shared, we want to do what Jesus did. And Jesus was so intentional. One of my favorite verses is it says that Jesus had to go to Samaria. Well, in that story, Jesus you wouldn't go through to Samaria. He was very intentional. And then you see in Samaria, he sits with a woman and asks those questions. He says and addresses problem, like he addresses her sin in that. But then he is loving and kind. And you see that with her, and you see that with his disciples. And for me, one of the things that I really appreciate is looking at my story is that people would relationally love on me, both in and out of group. They would allow me to share things, but they were so intentional about following up with me. And as we look at intentionality, first we ask the question, did Jesus do this? And we see Jesus modeling all kinds of different things. And for me, a lot of times that what helps me is when I'm in groups and navigating roadblocks, or even, we talked about challenges that we face in and out of group with situations and different things. A lot of times stuff can kind of help when we go and we connect with people outside of the group, or in the group, we can ask follow-up questions and ask those good questions. Or in the group, how do you navigate when someone goes off track, but you want to honor them and you still want to be able to kind of direct in truth? And so there's group guidelines. All of our groups we encourage heavily. Do we have group guidelines? Do we understand those? Do we talk about those and ask why? And one of the things I was so appreciative after my new group recently, in the last little bit, one of our people said, "I just broke that guideline, didn't I?" I was like, inside, I was like, yes,
wow,
right, yes.
That's great.
Sometimes when you're in a new group and no one's done groups, you sometimes are in those seasons. Sometimes our groups have been together for a long time, and that looks different. We all have different roadblocks and challenges, but do we create and foster that connection both in and out of group? Do we ask those questions? Do we follow up when we don't know the answers? I don't always know the answer. I don't know about you guys, but I don't always know, and to follow up and come back. And so anyways, those are some of the practical thoughts.
Can I think I'm hearing a theme of there's things that we can do as leaders that would be proactive. Like there's things that, like asking questions, group guidelines, where we're kind of casting a vision and we're setting the tone for group. And that's, I think, a really important part of leadership, which is, really, man, it's so easy to get off course and forget those basics. And so going back to those again and again, that would be a part of it. But maybe the other side, which is maybe more difficult, would be what we'd call like reactive. So proactive and reactive. So let's talk about to be an intentional leader when roadblocks come our way. And there's things it's like, this is just a really hard thing. And we've already named a few. It's like when someone's breaking confidentiality, they're over talking or gossiping or, really where conflict comes in a group. How would you say we approach difficulty, real difficult conversations? And even what you talked about Jesus, how Jesus did it. What have we learned to deal with and navigating reactive, hard conflict in a biblical way?
That's really good.
Any thoughts on that?
Sure, I'll kick it off. So my thoughts are, we have to have a relationship. We have to have trust.
That's great.
With those folks from the beginning. And so if we're going to call them out during a group, we want to do that. Like you said, we want to honor them. We want to show respect. Hey, I hear where you're going with that. Would it be okay if we talked about that after group? And then make sure to have a relationship and talk to them after group.
That's great.
Maybe go meet with them for coffee or the next day, let things settle and then discuss it. But it starts with an intentional relationship. So we have to be able to show love and trust from the get-go as leaders. And that includes something I'm really passionate about is being vulnerable ourselves and being able to show, I've messed up in this way, or here's what we're struggling with. Can anybody relate to that? So being vulnerable to your group as a leader, and we're messy people. We're all messy. And so it's not going to be a surprise to the other people that we struggle, but maybe it's a surprise we struggle in that way. And that's okay. It's okay to let them in. It's okay. It builds relationship and trust. And then when that awkward situation in group happens, they know we're human. They believe, oh, they mess up too. And so it gives us an opportunity to pull them aside after group and say, hey, I've struggled in this way. I see this happening. Yeah. Let's talk about this. Let's get through this together.
Posture to set the tone with, I think. And even just the vulnerability, sometimes we think that's going to lose credibility. Almost always it gains credibility because people are like, oh, you're real. Yeah. You're a human. Yeah.
It's really
Christian
good.
Thoughts?
No, that's really good. I think sometimes too, do I have an intentional plan? And sometimes when I have an intentional plan, I can sidestep a problem if I am aware. And so when I know my people well, if I see in the discussion of what we're going through, if I can have a plan and prepare beforehand, and I can see the potential problems about where a discussion could go, sometimes, I'm guilty of it. We roll in and I haven't prepped very well, and that's going to happen. But the more intentionality I can have on, okay, this is where the discussion's going, and sitting down, I like to sit down sometimes with my wife, Kyla, and go, hey, here's what the discussion is today. Can you see any way someone would have a challenge with this? To go, hey, someone might in their walk have this kind of question. And if I'm aware that might happen, then that can help me be prepared. And then also being okay to say, hey, that's really good. Can I go seek some wisdom? And I could actually even vision some of our church. Like, we actually have an awesome structure of coaches and things. And that's such a good question. I don't always know all the answers. Can I get back to you on that? And sometimes when people hear that you admit that and that's okay, that helps. And then an intentionality piece of, am I plugged into the Lord myself? Am I intentionally walking with Jesus so that when someone is doing something that is really irritating and I'm walking and abiding with Christ myself, maybe I'll have more patience with the situation. And also, as things come up, I'm going to be in a situation, no matter how much I prep, no matter how much I'm walking with Christ, no matter how much I'm walking with my coach, to have the understanding to have grace with yourself that I might mess up a situation and there might be mess. That's okay. And to give myself, grace in that, and then to walk with people and to be vulnerable in that, as Jenna shared too. Those are some practical things I think through.
I love that. Yeah, you went there. It's like even Jesus, the master disciple maker with 12 disciples, one tried to kill him. I think that's just a good perspective, and he was the Son of God and intentional in everything he did. And, he didn't do it perfectly by the outcome standard, which kind of leads us to, I think, a great place to kind of land this discussion. I want to go back to something you talked about, Christian, kind of in the session, which was this idea of planting and watering, our part and really God's part. Just explain that a little bit, because I think that's great context to get.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of my favorite verses. For us as leaders, the fact that we were transferred from the kingdom of darkness and now into the kingdom of light, that the things we used to live for were all about us. And now not only did God save us, which would be crazy in itself, he saved us from something, but also for something.
Wow.
And we get to be people who plant and water. And I think of planting as any time that I'm showing up and talking about the things of God, I'm encouraging them with the truth. I'm sharing truth with them. I'm planting. But then watering, I think of, sometimes we're in it with people in their messes. And as leaders, sometimes we're going to not be in situations where we're planting and we're watering and we're like, God, is this having any effect at all? I don't know if you've ever been a part of a group or you've been the person where people poured into you forever and nothing came of it and they were probably real frustrated. I can think of all kinds of people in my story where that was probably the case. Yep. And I think for us as leaders to go, God has called us to plant and to water, that we're leading regardless of whatever results that we see, that we're being intentional, that we're in the mess with people. And then it says that it's God that brings the growth. I believe that there are ingredients to planting and watering. Like you want to have your seeds, you want to have the water prepared. Like there's still intentionality behind that. But at the end of the day, when I show up and I live out what God has called me to do, then I'm entrusting the rest to him.
Man. That's a powerful visual. And I just think we can't miss that because we can get so caught up in, it's our group. Maybe it's a group that we branched. And I was just sharing the other day, I've about 50-50 for the groups that I've branched that are still meeting. And I could make that personal and I could go, I didn't train them well enough. It's like, well, they have a part and maybe there's a season. And at the same time, like God does things in people's lives. He uses a variety of different people and I'm just one of them. And I want to trust him with the bigger picture and the story of what he's doing. Jenna, any last thoughts from you on this whole conversation?
I just feel like it's an honor to be invited into leadership. I feel like Jesus invites us into a relationship with him, and we get to be invited into leadership, and we get to invite others into whatever that may be, whether it's group, relationship, leadership, whatever that is. I mean, the creator of the universe has invited us into this, and that's pretty cool. So that's an honor. So
that's great. Yeah. That's a great way to conclude is just that big picture that God uses us. And, it's his kingdom. Yeah. We're helping build his kingdom. Thank you guys for both the talk at our leadership, training, as well as this discussion. I'm sure there's probably 1,000 more questions we couldn't get to, but I do want to tell all of you out there, we have 2 more bonus episodes coming in the next few months of the same kind of conversation, unpacking some of our main sessions. So really looking forward to that. And upcoming, want to just drop this out there for next fall. We're going to be starting a new series in our group's leadership podcast about the 7 ministry essentials at Real Life. It's going to be just an awesome season. So thank you guys for being here today. And for all of the notes and further content, check out realliferesources.org. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for planting and watering. And we just trust the Lord for the growth that he's going to provide. We are grateful for the investment you make each week as you reach the world for Jesus, one person at a time, and make biblical disciples in relational environments. For notes from this show and other great resources to help you grow, visit realliferesources.org.